Good afternoon. Would you please rise and join me in the reciting of our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask that you remain standing and have Rotarian Jesse Schmidt come forward and share invocation.
Please bow your heads with me. Lord, thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for the food we partake in, and especially those who prepare and serve it. We pray for the protection of those South Dakotans that have blessed our communities and impacted our state through their service. Please continue to bring prosperity to our community, city, and our state to lift the well-being of us all. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right, thank you, Jesse, and good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome. This is an exciting program for us, as it is every year. We're looking forward to hearing from the latest class of South Dakota Hall of Famers. Before we do that, we're going to welcome our guests and current or previous Hall of Famers. Let's start with guests. Jesus has got the mic. If you could raise your hand when I call, he'll bring that over and make sure we get you properly introduced. Michelle, you have a guest. Michelle's right here, and she's got a mic.
Lori, if you'd stand. Rotarians, please meet Lori Beckvar, the new CEO of the South Dakota Hall of Fame. You may know her from USD and Crazy Horse.
Welcome, Lori. Dan Kipley, who also has a mic. No, he doesn't. He just talks like he does have a mic.
President Tony and fellow Rotarians, I'd like to introduce Monica Heather, who's with Pesca Construction. Welcome, Monica.
Great to have you, Monica. Welcome. Dwayne Walk from Rotary West is amongst us. Great to have you, Dwayne. Also, Thomas Asphalt is also with us from Rotary West. Great to have you. Joel Sylvester, you have a guest.
Thank you, President Tony, fellow Rotarians. Brad Green is my guest today. Brad works with me at 5-Star, and he writes the Pigskin Preview every fall where he interviews all the high school coaches. So we got a little while until that, but it'll be here before you know it.
Great to have you, Brad. Bill Byrne, you have two guests. We got the mic coming.
Formerly with Parker Transfer, Jeff Parker, and formerly CEO of Raven, Ron Moquist.
Excellent. Ron and Jeff, welcome. Thanks for being here. Actually, we have a third from Rotary West. Rotary West is a great turnout. Is it Oren? Thanks for being here. Thank you for being here. Darren Smith, you have a guest. We do, so they can hear, those tuning in online can hear you.
Mr. President, I do have a guest today, Brandon Hansen, who works with me with the Washington Pavilion Management Company. Brandon is our Director of Museums, which means he oversees our Kirby Science Discovery Center, Visual Arts Center, and Brandon is also Executive Director for Sculpture Walk.
Great to have you, Brandon. Eric Erickson.
Thanks, President Tony, fellow Rotarians. Once again with me, the intern for Friends of SDPB this year, SDSU Junior, Benjamin Connor.
Great to have you, Benjamin. And I actually have a guest, Marcus Malin. You rise. Marcus is a partner and commercial broker with NAI Sioux Falls. And great to have you here with us today, Marcus. Next, before we turn it over to Michelle, I would like to recognize the existing or the current South Dakota Hall of Famers that are with us today. Jesus has the mic. Just an opportunity for you to share who you are, the class that you were inducted, and anything you want to briefly share about yourself. Yeah, let's start over here. I think we have a concentration over in this corner here.
Larry Pressler, a class of 2020, I believe.
Great to have you, Larry. Thanks for being here.
Lauren Cheddar, and I'm the class, I think, of 2015.
Welcome, Lauren.
John Soderholm, 09.
Rod Perry, 2018.
Any other South Dakota Hall of Famers with us today? Thank you for being here, and thank you for your contribution to our state. Excited to have you here, and excited to hear from our latest class. Before we do, we're going to induct a new member to our club. I'm going to ask Dr. Sarah Cole to come forward and introduce Greg Neiser.
Thank you, President Tony, and thank you, fellow Rotarians. It is my honor today to welcome Greg Neiser and be able to do his introduction. He and I actually met shortly after I announced that I'd be running for City Council, and really I met him at the perfect time. And he was just such an instrumental part of my campaign, and I am just eternally grateful to him and his wife Jennifer for all their help helping me navigate this journey, especially as I start on the council. So big thanks to him. He obtained his BS in computer science from Southwest Minnesota State University in 2001. He works at Unisys, which is a worldwide technology solutions company, as a principal software engineer, and he's been there approximately 21 years. This company is involved with mission critical systems primarily used for banks, airlines, and government. And he's been awarded 3 U.S. patents for the design of a mission critical system. His public service began in 2011. Mike Huther appointed him to serve on the Falls Zoning Board of Adjustment. He was reappointed in 2014, and his service continued until 2016. In 2015, he was appointed to the Billboard Task Force, and in 2016, he was elected to represent the Northwest District. He was reelected in 2020, and he'll finish out his term in 2 years in 2024. While serving on the City Council, he's fulfilled numerous roles, including the chair of the Audit Committee, the Council Vice Chair, and Council Chair. And in 2021, he served on the Joint Task Force for Medical Cannabis. He's been very active in local political campaigns and advocacy. He's been married to his wife, Jennifer, for 20 years. She's a graphic designer, and she works at the Table Ministry, a church plant on the west side of Sioux Falls. They have one daughter, Olivia, who will be an 8th grader at Memorial Middle School this fall. So please welcome Greg Neiser.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to keep this short, which is very difficult for a politician. I love learning, so when I started attending, I was really impressed by the quality of the presentations. Every week has been engaging and informative. The philosophy of service above self really resonates with me. At Unisys, we don't just write software, we serve our customers. I'm on call 24/7. They're running mission critical systems, and so we have to be there whenever they need us, and we go above and beyond, and that's why they stick with us, and I'm really proud of that. That desire to serve is exactly why I joined public service. I wanted to give back, and I wanted to make a difference, and I hope I've made a positive contribution. We've accomplished a lot in 6 years on the City Council, and I say we because there's very little you can accomplish in a legislative body on your own. You cannot be effective unless you build relationships and trust with other city councilors, the mayor, city staff, stakeholders, and citizens. It doesn't mean you're always going to agree. It doesn't mean you have to compromise your principles. But when you disagree without being disagreeable and treat people in the way that you want to be treated, and you don't worry about who gets credit, and realize that making incremental progress is okay, you will be effective. The great thing is these lessons are applicable in all parts of life. Many times we focus on the big things, the huge legislation we pass, but I've found many of the things that have been the most rewarding have been the little things that many people will never know about. Helping the individual citizen with the problem. Really, as city councilors, we're facilitators, we're problem solvers. We help people find solutions, and that's very rewarding. The relationships that I've built on the city council with everybody in the community has been probably the thing that I treasure the most, and I'm sure that's going to continue and be enhanced as part of this group. So I hope I can find more ways to serve and build relationships and lead after my current public service role ends, and I know being part of Rotary will provide more of those opportunities. I'm honored to be your newest member. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sarah and Greg, and thank you both for your service to our community. All right, now turning to our panelists, we're going to start with bios of each, and we could spend a lot of time because we have a very accomplished group here. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of each, and then I'll turn it over to Michelle. We're going to start with Dr. David Kopaska. After a successful military career and family medicine practice, David Kopaska became Senior Vice President for Medical Affairs at Avera McKinnon. The last 7 years at Avera, he served as CEO prior to his retirement. Dr. Kopaska has impacted healthcare statewide with his innovative push and adoption of Avera eICU, now Avera eCare ICU, which was among the early telemedicine offerings and is now the world's most robust and extensive telemedicine network serving rural healthcare. He also facilitated the development of the state's only transitional care unit at Avera Prince of Peace and the Avera eCare School Health Program. He has served on numerous nonprofit boards and is an avid volunteer. Welcome, David Kopaska. Next, Angela Kennecke, is an award-winning investigative reporter and broadcast journalist. Angela Kennecke has spent 3 decades keeping people informed on the evening news. Her investigative reports led to the changes in state laws. In recent years, many of Angela's stories focused on the growing opioid crisis. On the day that her 21-year-old daughter, Emily, died of an overdose, Angela was working on a story on Good Samaritan laws and overdose deaths. Angela has taken Emily's story nationwide and internationally. She speaks tirelessly about the issues surrounding opioid addiction, a parent's frustration, and a sense of helplessness that tells it all from the perspective of a mother who lost her own child. Angela started a charity called Emily's Hope because she wants to offer hope to other families struggling with addiction. Welcome, Angela. Dan Kirby has been one of the state's most successful businessmen, leaders, and philanthropists. His career success has been admirable, but the work he has done through public service and philanthropy has been truly remarkable, sending ripples throughout his city, state, and nation. Dan advocated tirelessly for South Dakota as a longtime member of the United States Chamber of Commerce, serving on their board. Perhaps his most significant singular accomplishment was leading the team that made the dream of the Washington Pavilion a reality. The Washington Pavilion has made Sioux Falls a better, richer place to live for people from all walks of life and of all ages. This strong support for the arts has also emboldened other South Dakota communities to make the arts a priority. Welcome, Mr. Dan Kirby. Next, Steve Lindquist has devoted his career to helping others. He was appointed administrator of the South Dakota Human Services Center in the wake of the crisis at that facility. At the time, he was the youngest administrator in the facility's 100-plus year history. He led the design and construction of the George S. Mickelson Center for the Neurosciences and served as Director of Mental Health for the state of South Dakota, making him one of only 2 people to have that dual role. As the executive leader of Avera Behavioral Health, he expanded treatment programs and led the design and construction of Avera Behavioral Health Center. The number of outpatients served by his program is well over 100,000. Welcome, Steve Lindquist. And our moderator today, you know her well, Michelle Lavallee, is a downtown Rotarian, a past president of this club, an immediate past president for the South Dakota Hall of Fame. Michelle currently serves as CEO for the Children's Home Society of South Dakota. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle.
Great, thank you, Tony. Thanks for agreeing to be on the panel today. This program has become a tradition of our downtown Sioux Falls Rotary Club to introduce the newest inductees from the South Dakota Hall of Fame. And just a note, you may have seen in your email that Marion Sullivan was also inducted. She was represented by her daughter, Kathy, so she was not able to be with us today. Your class had to wait a bit longer to be inducted thanks to COVID, but I think it was worth the wait. So let's get right to it. Question 1, starting with Angela. Just a couple of weeks ago, you all experienced your induction ceremony into the South Dakota Hall of Fame. Now that you've had a chance to reflect on that event, what will you remember most about the weekend and joining the over 700 South Dakotans who are already in the hall?
I think I'll remember how overwhelming it was and really how honored I am to be in the Hall of Fame. Being a longtime employee of Kello, Dave Dedrick and Joe Floyd come before me. So for me, that's incredible, that I followed those 2 giants from Kello land. And I just met so many great people through this experience, all these men sitting on the stage and so many others. And I think it was just, my whole family was there. That was also fantastic. So my family lives all around the country and they flew in, and that was like a big family reunion. So it was really awesome.
Oh, and it was so fun to see them all.
And just seeing more of the Hall of Fame too, the actual building and the site, spending a little more time there than I ever have.
It's impressive.
Yeah, very much so.
That's great.
And I also, again, just humbled isn't the right word, but I just felt it was an incredible experience that I was a part of it.
It's great. Steve, how about you?
Well, I have to echo what Angela said. It was a great experience overall. To meet the 10 people or the representatives of some of the 10 was a great experience. It's interesting in the sense, you look through the list of people who are in the Hall of Fame, at 700. There's remarkable people on there, the whole 700. Some we know the names right away, and others we don't. But what I found with our group of 10, as well as knowing some of the people who are already in the hall, they're good people too. It's not just that they're successful, but these are good human beings. And that was one of the things that probably impressed me the most, was just how genuinely good these people were and are.
Absolutely. How about you, Dan?
Well, it was great. It was well done. It was clearly the most fun I've ever had in Oklahoma. The most fun for me was following my great-grandfather into the Hall of Fame. Joe Kirby was a fiery Irish lawyer at the turn of the last century. Had a bunch of famous cases. Telephone company, unfortunately, without asking, put a pole up on his corner, which he sawed down the next day, and a real character. He was inducted, though, roughly 70 years after he died, and the way we did it was a lot more fun.
It was fun. How about you, Dave?
Well, it was, as these folks have said, I mean, it was an amazing experience, very humbling. Your family came in from all over the country also, and so that was very special, along with a lot of special friends. I think as I look out here, I think we could draw straws for who is in the next class, because there's just a group of wonderful, wonderful people. And it reminded me, the thing that popped into my head, this is a little strange, but do you remember Gene Challet from the Today Show? Way back, big mustache and puffy hair and such. He was interviewing one morning the chief of police in New York City. And he asked him about New York's finest. And the chief got done with his thing. And Gene said, you know, he says, I guess I never really figured or thought of myself as one of New York's finest. I guess just one of New York's pretty goods. So I think I think there are a whole lot of us pretty goods around that care a lot about each other, and to be lifted up for that is a real honor, and to be on this team is phenomenal. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I'd also like to take this time to welcome Delta David Geyer, who's the really the music director for the South Dakota Hall of Fame. And which year did you come in, David? The COVID year, 2020. Good to have you here, sir. My next question, and I'd like to have you spend maybe 3 minutes on, is about the mission of the South Dakota Hall of Fame, and that's to champion a culture of excellence. You're all examples of excellence and have so many extraordinary accomplishments. So I want to turn to just focus to some of those key accomplishments that you all highlighted in your speeches. And I'm just going to keep you on your toes, so I'm going to just switch who goes next. So Dan, I'm going to start with you. I love the fact that your great-grandfather Joe was inducted into the Hall of Fame for his accomplishments. It's a prominent pioneer lawyer and founder of Western Surety back in 1900, and an organization which you also led as well. The story I really enjoyed, which led to one of your most impactful accomplishments, had its beginning at the downtown Rotary in August of 1989. Right. Can you take us back to that August date and how it led to something that truly transformed our city, our state, and our region?
Well, I was walking peacefully out of this meeting and was accosted at the front door by the mayor and superintendent of schools. They said they had a little project for me, take 2 or 3 months. It was called the Public Facilities Committee, which was really the feasibility committee to determine if my old high school building and my parents' old high school building could function as a performing arts center with government offices on the north and south side. 15 months and $250,000 later, we came back and said, yes, it's perfect. You peel back the roof on this old courtside structure, take out the gym and the auditorium, and drop in a world-class performing arts center, which is exactly what we did, but it took 10 years and 2 months. Throughout that process, I was able to lead the feasibility study, the election campaign, the largest capital fundraising campaign in our history, right up through the implementation and construction portion. We opened in October, as Angela said, of '99 with New York Philharmonic one weekend and Yo-Yo Ma the next. Now, the thing that kept that moving forward, there were 2 groups that really had to work together, had to be going in the same direction for a full decade. One was the arts community, and one was the business, professional, political community. I'll call that the establishment. These were the artsies. The establishment thought that the artsies' view of a perfect city budget would be 95% to the arts and 5% to plow the snow so they could get there. The arts groups, on the other hand, thought that the establishment's view of performing arts was Elvis. And none of those perceptions were wrong, by the way. Having paid my dues in each group over the years, been a young chamber president, having been involved in the right civic stuff forward Sioux Falls, I had the credibility to ensure that group that the artsies are not going to run crazy with their budget and their planning. And having spent enough time with the arts groups, commiserating in the great need for a performing arts center, I was able to convince them that the establishment would not be permitted to pull the rug out from under them at any time during the process. So, right place, right time. I looked around over that 10 years and 2 months to find somebody else who might be in the right place at the right time. It was a short field.
But where would we be without the Washington Pavilion in our city? Really, all of us have just loved it. I bet you love hearing this story, Darren, huh? That's awesome. Thank you, Dan. Steve, let's talk about your career. It seems that so many times as we read your application, the South Dakota Human Services Center in Yankton has played a recurring role. Can you tell us, you were the youngest administrator in the history of this organization. Could you talk about that as a real accomplishment?
I would say very much unplanned is how to describe it. I was graduating from USD and Vietnam War was going on and the draft was still in place. So I made no plans for a job because I didn't need a job. I knew where I was going to be headed when I graduated. So the draft ended shortly before I graduated. And all of a sudden, I got to find a job. And I hate to kind of say this, but I knew I can always get a job at the Human Services Center. You know, that really doesn't sound very good, but that was my attitude at the time. But I worked there beginning as a mental health aide. That's an entry-level position on the mental health units, including the nursing home units. So got to know a lot of folks who were going through very, very difficult times. And at that time, treatment medications were marginal, to say the least. And got to see psychiatric symptoms kind of full-blown. And for some reason, I just felt an affinity for folks who had these disorders. And I don't know how to explain that, but this is where I fit. Now, I stayed there for a few years and became a social worker there, but frankly left because conditions weren't very good at that time. And I felt, you know, I can't do this anymore. So I left and I worked for the state of South Dakota. I did child protection for a few years, went to graduate school, came back to Yankton after graduate school in Michigan. And the new administrator at the Human Services Center contacted me and said, you know, we want to improve things out here. We want this to be a different place. Would you come back? And I did as a social worker and became head of the social work department there. I was about to become director of mental health for the state of South Dakota, and we were going to move to Pierre. We showed our daughters where this is where you're going to live, this is where you go to school. And it was the weekend of the Laura Ingalls Wilder pageant up in DeSmet. We were driving home and listened to WNX radio, and we heard about an incident that involved the Human Services Center, where a patient had left an outing and went and found a shotgun and killed a mom and her young daughter. And at that point in time, I knew, you know, the world had changed in terms of the Human Services Center. So unfortunately, in the wake of that, the administrator and the medical director were fired. And my boss in Pierre said, we can't have you come to Pierre. Things are too unstable at this point in time. We need you to be there. So I ended up being there months longer than anticipated. And after a while, we started talking, maybe I should just stay and be in the administrator's role. And so that's what happened. Very difficult time. In the facility, if a facility can go through a depression, it did. The doctors wanted to leave, the staff wanted to leave, the community was appropriately in an uproar. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy for that family and certainly for the Yankton community and really statewide as well. So how do you put that back together again? How do you try to let people know that this is a huge outlier and that people need good treatment, not to be punished? And the facility needs to be supported and not punished. So I was in that role for probably about 8 years and then also took on the director of mental health role after a while. But what I was able to be involved in was the building of the new HSC, the George S. Mickelson Center for the Neurosciences. And one of the things in the midst of all of that, we put together a brand new program that nationally was fairly new. We had to get a special blessing from Medicaid nationally for it so that we could create programs that actually went into the community and helped people who had serious mental illness disorders. And during the time that program started while I was administrator, we dropped the census by 100 patients, and nobody knew it. It was the most satisfying thing ever because so many of these people wanted to desperately leave the institution and live successfully, and they did. The first program was in Yankton, which you think about the context for that program developing there, that was tough. That was very tough to do, and we had to have a lot of community involvement for that to come about. But it did, and it worked, and able to be involved in the construction of that facility, but also changes in programming. I left for Avera after a time and helped with their behavioral health programs there about almost 20 years. And then retired from Avera, and lo and behold, I got called back to Human Services Center. The state contacted me and said, we need an interim administrator. We got some challenges here. And what I didn't know, and I said, yes, I'll go back, was that they had had a very serious patient situation and were about to lose all their Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, millions of dollars. And so that was the task. Let's get this fixed. Let's get in compliance with Medicare and Medicaid, which we did. The first survey that came in was the survey results were 64 pages long. The survey that happened 3 months later after we got things in order was 1 page long with no deficiency. So it's been an interesting ride. I'll say that. And how I got in those positions, I have absolutely no idea. It just sort of happened. I guess I'll just say that.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing that. You made such a difference in mental health in South Dakota. One of the things about being on this board, guys, is that you get to read 60 or 7 applications a year, and it just makes you so proud to be a South Dakotan, to realize all these things happened here. And Dave, I was struck by yours. You've had the good fortune to be successful in a real variety of areas. A military career as a pilot with service in Vietnam after the Air Force Academy, then an MBA and a stint with Mobil Oil, which I loved. I remember we talked about that in marketing. Then you went to medical school, had a career in family practice, which led to an administrative position as senior vice president at Avera McKinnon, and then finally as president. But you weren't done yet, because you served as the interim president of the Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. As you reflect on your career, Dave, does the launch of the early telemedicine offering stand out as something that you're most proud of?
Well, it certainly does. I think from that list you read, sitting next to Steve, schizophrenia comes to mind. But anyway, at least a good shot of ADD, one or the other. My wife would assure you of that. You know, when I came to Avera, I hadn't been there very long, and a book, To Err is Human, came out that you might be familiar with. It said we were killing about 99,000 people a year who came to the hospital well and didn't leave, and around the country. And that, you know, what were we going to do about that, and how were we going to look at ourselves? One of the pieces in there said that any institution that takes care of critical care patients should have an intensivist on staff, an intensive care specialist. We had at Avera 28 hospitals at the time, 3 of which had intensivists. All the rest didn't. Rural hospitals, family practice, primary care, doing a wonderful job. And I'd been one of those in a small town. And I remember one night that an old friend of mine came in and had just been struck on his tractor by a semi, had 21 fractured ribs. My partner, my only partner, had just gone to Mayo to a meeting. So it was a little bit lonely. And 5 minutes later, a family brought their baby in who was in full SIDS. So in 5 minutes, my life changed. I'd been in practice a whole month, so I was really well trained at that point. But what I found was that I knew pretty much what to do, but I really needed verification from somebody to say, you're right on the right track. And I think we've all lived that through our own career. So that was one of the things that made me think when I was answering this question to Fred Slenick about what are you going to do about this is we're just going to look. A few weeks later, actually, I met at a quality conference in Orlando 2 intensivists from Johns Hopkins. And they had set up a telemedicine unit at Johns Hopkins to cover their 6 intensive care units around the campus, that either 6 of them had to be on call or one of them could be on call to cover those if they did it right. And the bells went off to me that the only difference between Johns Hopkins and South Dakota is the distance between our places, our intensive care units. So, and fortunately, Governor Janklow had just connected all the schools in the country or in the state with fiber. So, and thank God for small towns, the school ain't far from the hospital. So, we ran wires and to the hospital and had the opportunity then to institute this thing called the EICU. First rural attempt in the world. But I had this picture of my friend with 21 fractured ribs and such, and what the hell do we do next? So it kept me going, and what happened was that software would feed in all of the monitors, the ventilator, the labs, the x-rays, the medical record, the nurse's notes and the physician's notes, all into a computer. And it basically is like the check engine light in your car. It actually, if something's trended out of line, a light would come on and say, check me. And so what eventually happened was that we were able to, one doctor and a nurse or two supporting them, that changed with time, but could watch over 30, 50, up to 100, and even 150 patients at once. And you go, really? With a reduction in mortality of 1/2 from what was predicted. Because we were watching every patient virtually every minute of every day. And what we learned was that, God bless our nurses, are absolutely fantastic. They usually have 2 patients. If they're over here having a problem with one, there ain't nobody looking at this guy. Okay? And we could be there. So that's, it was so exciting. I'll just tell you one story and stop. There are hundreds of them. But all 28 hospitals, and then you've read, I'm sure, about a very e-care spread from there and it grew. This was a night that a toddler, and I know he was less than 2, I don't remember his exact age, in a town 100 miles from here, snuck outside during a family party in a blizzard. And by the time people recognized he wasn't there and went out to find him, they couldn't find him. And they searched and searched and searched, finally found him. He was comatose. Took him to the local hospital, and his temperature was 82.5. That is not 98.6, and that is a real problem, to say the least. It was a blizzard, no planes. It was a blizzard, no ambulance, nothing to move the fellow, except we could use the EICU. So we moved him to the EICU bed. We got our pediatric intensivist from here to get on the other end of the line, and we warmed him over 20, I think it was about 20 hours, so that we warmed his body back up. And he is normal today. He lost the tips of 3 fingers to frostbite, and that's the only thing wrong with him. And you know, if I ever asked myself, was it worth it for that kid? Yes, and for all the ones that came behind it, yes. And that's why we did it, and I can't be more proud.
Dave, I always remember that one of the outcomes was that you were able to discharge out of the ICU an average of 1 day earlier.
Yes.
Which is a pretty big deal.
Yes, it is.
Over 20 years' time, that's proved to be the case.
Yes. And again, part of that was, the big thing is getting people off ventilators. If you have a brain at all as an intensivist, you don't start that at 11 o'clock at night, because you will get a call every hour till morning. So wait till morning. But if you have somebody on the scene that's watching constantly, to start at 4 in the afternoon, 10 o'clock at night, 3 in the morning, if they look like they could tolerate it, then work. So our ventilator time went in half again, and the outcomes were phenomenal. And again, as Dan said, it's a team sport. I just kind of encourage people to keep trying and be confident in it. And I think we made it. IBM said the most prolific telemedicine, rural telemedicine system in the world. So in good old South Dakota.
Aren't these guys interesting? Thank you, Dave. Love that story. Angela, so many of us feel we know you, right? And we know you from seeing you on the news and your extraordinary broadcasting career. You captivated the audience at the honor ceremony a couple of weeks ago. with the story of Emily's Hope, the nonprofit you helped found to honor your daughter. With so many accomplishments in your life, how has Emily's Hope become your proudest achievement?
Well, Emily's Hope is a labor of love. I love my daughter. You know, she was 21 years old. She'd given me hell for 7 years. It was really tough. She was my oldest child, and she was a rebel. And I didn't really know how to handle that. I'm a good researcher as a journalist. I even took a course in oppositional defiant children, what to do. At the same time, on the other side of the coin, she was brilliant. She was an artist. She was academically gifted. She was athletically gifted. Some of you may have heard me speak about her before. So when I lost my child, I think it's the worst thing that can happen to anybody who is a parent, mother, father. Worst thing that can happen in any family. And I don't really care how old that child is. We're supposed to die before our children. It's out of the natural order of things. And I really didn't know if I would ever be able to go back to work again. I didn't think that I could face that. Go back on television again, have all these eyeballs staring at me, go out in public, have people whispering in the corner, did you hear what happened to her daughter? So I knew one thing. First of all, I had to go back to work. I had to support my other children, send them to college. And I had to own my own story. I couldn't let someone else tell it for me. And I had asked so many parents over the years and other people to speak after horrible things that happened to them, tragedies. And every single one of those parents, in fact, I've got a story coming up this week about a child who completed suicide. And his parents spoke to me in hopes that their tragedy, their story, could make a difference in someone else's life. And that is really what I wanted to do. I don't want this to happen to my worst enemy, what happened to me. My daughter was poisoned by fentanyl. And she had been using different substances for a while. I didn't know exactly what she was using. And we were 3 days away from holding an intervention for her. And I just wanted people to know, first of all, that they weren't alone if they were facing this kind of struggle. And I also didn't want anyone else to ever go through it again. Unfortunately, when Emily died of fentanyl poisoning, it was 192 people a day that were dying from overdose. That number today, just 4 years later, is 294 people. I feel like I'm shouting from the rooftops, but I'm not getting the kind of national attention that we need and all of the resources we need to put to this problem. However, in my little corner of the world, and certainly not alone, I'm doing what I can to try to make a difference. I'm not doing this alone, though, by any means. In fact, I was devastated after Emily's death. I had a real crisis of faith, and I felt like I couldn't go on. But I feel, I'm not going to get too preachy here, but I feel like God, our love, or whatever you want to call it, showed up in the form of other people in this community and kept me going, helped me organize events, gave me purpose in my pain, helped me figure out what I was going to do to make the difference that I wanted to make. And so far, Emily's Hope has helped 233 people go through treatment at the Avera Addiction Care Center. And that's just adults. And we pledged another $100,000 for the adolescent unit that they just opened up with 8 beds in April. And we're currently raising funds for that. But the one thing that means the most to me in all of this, of course, helping all these people, and they've all come beside me now too, many of them, to support Emily's Hope, the people who received the treatment scholarships. But the most important thing is that I want to make sure it doesn't happen to your kid and your grandchild and your niece or your nephew. So we're doing educational curriculum. I've had, again, these amazing people come beside me, professors, child psychiatrists, educators, counselors, and we're piloting curriculum in Del Rapids in August in the 3rd grade, because I say that we have to get to kids younger. Our entire program is going to be K through 12, but we're focusing on the elementary school to start, and we're going to teach them about the brain. We're going to teach them about what substances do to the brain in age-appropriate ways, so that they can understand how to protect their brain, and we're dealing with the whole child, emotions, all of that. And I'm so excited about all of it, and it's what keeps me going. You know, I always say there are 2 kinds of people in the world. bouncers and splatters. I didn't make this up. I heard it somewhere a long time ago, but it really resonated with me. We all get thrown into the pit. Your pit may look different than mine. You know, your pit may have a different color, different wallpaper, different something on it. It's a different situation. But we have a choice, whether we're going to splatter on the bottom of that pit or whether we're going to bounce to the top and make meaning. My daughter's death was meaningless. You know, poisoning, fentanyl poisoning. That's what it is. It's not overdose. But I'm taking a horrible thing, a tragedy that happened to me and to my family, and finding purpose in it. I'm going to bounce back up by helping other people. So that's your answer.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Angela. Wow. Maybe we all bounce to the top. Yeah, Dave.
I'm going to be inappropriate here for just a second. Your story is wonderful. That you're probably used to that. But I sit between two amazing people here. And
feelings mutual.
Thank you. Thank you. But what Steve planned and his people planned out at the new Behavioral Health Center at Avera, and I'm retired, so I'm just in the middle, but is a 24-hour-a-day urgent care center for mental health. And what's happened in our country so often is that if you have a behavioral problem that has you out of sorts or your family out of sorts, they had to go to the emergency room. And I can tell you, if somebody's bleeding or having a heart attack, they go first. I have a friend in New York City that said they've had patients wait 72 hours in the waiting room for a behavioral health issue. That's inappropriate, obviously. But the new urgent care center, I just want everybody to know it's there, not for business sake, but for the people's sake, that at 2 in the morning, if you don't know what the hell to do with your family member or yourself, go there and see a mental health, a behavioral health specialist to start getting things sorted out. What you do after that is, you know, it comes second. But I think that we haven't had that ever in this area. We don't have it in most areas. There's nothing to do. I had a daughter that struggled, and I remember sitting in my chair at night. My wife's almost a PhD educator, and I'm a doc, and we can't figure out what to do for her. Who the heck else can at that point in time? So yeah, I just throw that in because I think it's like the golden hour in heart attacks. If you have chest pain, go to the hospital. If you have urgent mental health challenges, the place is open 24/7 with professionals. So I apologize for stepping in, but I think it's really important for all of us to know, because somebody in most of our families will struggle with this at some point in time, and just knowing is important.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Dave. I want to switch gears here a little bit. We have 2 questions left. You guys are doing so good. This Downtown Rotary Club has a key focus on mentoring. So this is kind of a 2-part question. You can answer one or the other or both. Did you have a mentor in your life that helped you to be successful as you are today? And or have you been someone's mentor? And if so, can you share a story about that relationship? And this time we're going to give it over to Steve to start.
Well, I did have a really good mentor. I just didn't know that that's what this person was at the time. We never defined it in that sense. But it was the person I replaced at Human Services Center, ironically. But he would bring me into meetings that I'm thinking, why am I here? You know, I'm typically the youngest one in the room at that point in time. And then we would talk about it afterwards, what happened in that meeting. And he would talk about long-range plans for the facility or operational issues or administrative things. And I really didn't know what was happening at that point in time, but that was a mentor relationship. And I gained so much from that. It really was a remarkable experience. And I look back on that. They were very special times during that window of time to help me go other places, which was interesting. And that's sometimes what mentors do, is they help people go other places. From my standpoint, when I got older and had people working for me, I tried to develop that same kind of relationship with some of my key people as to, let's talk about this. What happened? Could we have done something differently? And I think that was very helpful. But knowing that this question was coming, I started thinking about, well, who have I had on my team that I would say I mentored over time, and started thinking about it. Well, what has happened with some of those folks? 2 people became very successful mental health center directors. One became the head of Avera personnel, human resources. There were some medical directors in there, and then the person who replaced me at Avera, Thomas Otten, had that relationship with Thomas. And so it's really nice to see how these things can roll out. You create that ripple effect. And so I think, we have all experienced help from others, and our challenge then is to how can we help others in similar ways. And I get really pleased, excited to see what the folks that I've worked with in the past are now doing and have done. So it's didn't know the name, mentor, wouldn't have known it, but that's exactly what it was.
That's wonderful. How about you, Dan? Mentors in your life?
I'm sure I had mentors, but I think they related to golf. And my mentoring, I think, focused in our business. I was general counsel of a specialty insurance company that sold all these goofy little products all around the country. One thing that ran through all these products was that they were a product of statute or regulation. In other words, it's nothing you'd go into an insurance agent and say, I want to buy a surety bond. You only did it because you had to become a car dealer or a notary public or a public official. And when I arrived, I didn't think the industry was doing a good job at all of promoting and protecting those lines of business, teaching public policymakers the value that was added to our economy by those products. So off the corner of my desk, I kind of started running this little lobbying department. And I realized it got too big after I had visited 27 state capitals. Hired Bill Peterson, former House Majority Leader in South Dakota, and he subsequently trained Nan Baker, among others. Nan of the school board fame here in Sioux Falls. I think that was my mentoring, more teaching by doing, or more appropriately, I'm tired of doing this, so please do it.
Thank you. Dave, did you have mentors in your life, or
Well,
did you mentoring?
One key one that I never thought of as a mentor, but he was the head of the Life Sciences Department at the Air Force Academy, and he also was our academic advisor for the basketball team. And we wondered about him because he always got our grades before we did, which was problematic at times. But he came in after we were playing Tulane, and it was right after the game, and he walked into the locker room and said, "Hey, Dave," I think I was a sophomore. He said, "You ever think of going to medical school?" I said, "Pete," I said, "I'm a jock. What the hell would I do in medical school?" And 10 years later, I went, and never went away. He was in Aberdeen, by the way, and was the patient who crashed in the helicopter coming down. For some that might know him, a very special Pete, to say the least. I think on the other side, I think our examples are important, and one of my mantras as a leader is that to create an environment where everybody around you can be more than they ever thought they could be, which is sort of constant mentorship, I suppose. But and I'm not going to say that I was perfect at that, but I have had a high school student that I knew once that had come back to town and ran into her, and I said, "What are you doing now?" And she said, "I'm a pediatrician." I said, "Well, I had no idea you were interested." And she said, "Yeah, because of you." So I think sometimes one word or one line, like Pete gave me, "Why don't you go to medical school?" That's the only time we ever talked about it, and it never went away. So I think we can have a lot of influence in young people that we don't even recognize as formal mentoring, and I'm all for that too. But that would be my
Absolutely.
history.
Thank you, Dave. Angela, do you have a mentoring story?
Yes, I have a few. How much time do we have?
No, 1 minute.
Okay, I'll hurry. My mom was my first mentor. She's a writer and a college professor, retired now. But she used to have me turn in papers to her starting in 3rd grade through 6th grade. I'd have to research the papers and write them and She would literally grade them. That's what I grew up with. So no wonder why I do what I do. And then my next mentor was Hemmingson, Steve Hemmingson, who only referred to me as Kenneke, just like that. And I would come in, and I'm writing this story thinking I got it all. I went to journalism school. I got it all figured out. I'd write it. And then he just erased the whole thing and just write it over again. And better, always better. So I learned how to be a better writer from him. He was a tough, craggy guy, but I mean, we have such a good relationship. He sent me a gift for getting in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then in terms of my mentoring, it's one of my favorite things to do in the newsroom. I'm now, I was the youngest person in the newsroom suddenly, and I'm the oldest, one of the oldest people, not the oldest, one of the oldest people in the newsroom. And my favorite thing is to mentor young journalists and to help them develop into good storytellers. And then they leave me, and they go off to some bigger market somewhere. But it is one of my favorite
It's fun,
things
though.
to do. Yeah.
Well, speaking of storytelling, that's one of the missions of the South Dakota Hall of Fame is really to inspire others to chase their dreams through storytelling. So your stories are going to live on. It's the most, I think, people don't know this, but the 4th grade curriculum in South Dakota has the stories of South Dakota Hall of Famers. Isn't that great? And kids can choose which ones that they most relate to. But one thing in South Dakota that we know is that many South Dakotans believe the young people need to leave South Dakota to be successful, to pursue a career of their dreams. Could you just give us maybe 30 seconds, any advice you might have for our South Dakota youth to inspire them to stay or come back to our great state? And you could just take it. Dave, you didn't forget to start, so why don't you start?
Okay. Community. Because I was in the military and then with mobile, and then, and I moved to a lot of different places, and I know lots of you have also. But every time you move like that, you have to start building a new community. And that's a wonderful opportunity in some ways. But the community that you have right here is so powerful. And I think sometimes you think you can't be a big banker if you're not in New York City and all that sort of thing. But the opportunities here are amazing. We're always in the top 5 or 6 or 7 of the best places for young business people and all that sort of thing. Hallelujah. But to know that your high school friend sells cars, or your uncle, can help you fix your house, or what, those community things are so powerful. And it's the most amazing example is right here. You don't have to think very long if you need a little advice on something. And I can tell you, if you get plopped in the middle of Chicago or New York City, you have to think a while before you can find it, and you don't know for sure what you're going to get. So
Absolutely.
I think the community is much more powerful than kids think as they look to their careers.
They learn later. How about you, Angela?
I can't imagine starting a charity the way I did and getting the kind of support anywhere else. I mean, I think that people here are so caring and compassionate and kind. I really do.
Absolutely.
And I also think that I thought this is a great place to raise a family. I still believe that. I think I thought something that happened to my daughter couldn't happen here. But we all know we have some of the same social problems as every place else. But I would say that the access to resources and the standard of living and everything else is just so important. We have an advantage over other areas.
Absolutely.
I just wish I could improve on the winters just a little bit. I yell at Jay all the time.
Yeah, Dan.
Well, I was 1 for 1 for a long time. I brought Arlene Wagner to South Dakota from California. We've only been roommates now for 50 years and 9 months. We did a little less well with our kids who don't live here and are not coming back. But we got to keep working on this. The one ingredient I would throw back into the equation is keep our taxes reasonable, because there is literally an exodus now from some states that have better weather than we do, but terrible taxes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Steve, you have the last word for us?
Yeah, growing up, lived in Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado. Most of my growing up years were in Colorado. We moved to South Dakota when I was in high school, and Beersford. And so going from being 60 miles from Estes Park, the mountains every day as I walked towards school, to Beersford, it was a little challenging, and the winters were a lot worse here, are a lot worse here. But I think back to that. I come from probably a lower middle class socioeconomic family, and we had no connections to anybody. And I think the only way that I could have experienced what I have throughout my career is in South Dakota. I was given opportunities that I don't know that I could have gotten any other place. And one of the stories had to do with my interview for the Human Services Center with Governor Mickelson, and he wondered how old I was because I'm this little short guy, and I wasn't very old at the time. But what he said, I think, is indicative of what South Dakotans do to help others. He said, at your age, at 38, I was doing this, and if I could do that, you can do this. So it was not only the opportunity, but it was the sense of support. You can do this. Go for it. I think South Dakota is one of the few places, maybe the only place, where that truly could happen in that manner.
Well, here's to South Dakota, you guys. Thank you so much for joining this panel, and congratulations on your induction.
Yeah.
And we're going to take a picture, so all of those in the Hall of Fame, if you'd stay and come right down here, Lori's going to have our show. Thanks, Tony.
Ask you one more time, give it up for this group of inductees, absolute giants for our state. Excellent. Looking ahead, we have Rotary After Hours, 4:30 to 6 this Thursday at our wine bar. Please join us for Rotary Social. You have an opportunity to vote tomorrow. I encourage you to get out and take part in the primary. Next Monday, our program will be the state of philanthropy in our community. We'll hear about how that has been a competitive advantage for us and really propelled us forward. Andy Patterson and Cindy Peterson will join us for that. And then if you enjoyed today's program as I did, you want to join us in September. This is going to be a special year. Michelle talked about the 2021 class being recognized in 2022. We're going to have another class be inducted that was just named, and we're going to do this again in September with that special group. So look forward to that. That being said, Rotary is adjourned. Have a great week.